Hey everybody, how you doing? Stuart Armstrong from Talent Equation here. Been a while since I posted last, so I was just been thinking about a number of things and wanted to share them with you. The big thing that's on my mind at the moment is the whole drills versus games debate. As you've probably seen, that anybody who follows me on Twitter or anything like that, I've been involved in some interesting conversations with a number of people and having gone back and forward, I suppose, around the whole idea of, should we be trying to, coach through games? Should we be engaging young people, particularly using a game-based model, or should we go down a different approach and actually look to develop techniques using, uh, more of a drill structure, I suppose, where you get an awful lot of repetition, then apply those into the games. I mean, from my perspective, I think there's a lot of research out there now that is suggesting that developing skill requires a context. If you are looking to develop people's abilities, if you're looking people to develop people's capabilities, they really need to be doing that within a context-specific environment. Otherwise, what they learn to do is not representative of what they're going to experience. I imagine lots of coaches out there have had that frustrating situation where you've worked on something with a group and then it comes to the match, it comes to the game day, and the same group don't seem to apply anything that you've talked about in the game. And there's a pretty simple explanation for that. They've never actually experienced it in a context that in any way resembles the game context. So it's hardly surprising that you don't see what they've practiced appearing in the game because it hasn't been practiced in a game-like context. Now, for many people, I can understand some of the issues with this because they'll feel that there's a need to if you just use a game context, then there's a problem because you're not going to get people getting the required number of repetitions at a given movement in order for them to become more effective at executing that particular movement. I get it. I understand that. I understand that argument. And to be honest, there's been times actually where I've had similar thoughts myself. But that's because I think there's a tendency to think of this in sort of two extremes. On the one extreme over here, you've got the kind of game, and on the other extreme over here, you've got the isolated drill. And those two things seem to be sort of opposing each other. But it's the space in the middle where we need to operate, and it's the space in the middle where we need to we can find some really excellent opportunities to essentially cover off both bases. So just to explore that a little bit more, I think part of the reason a lot of people are opposed to when I talk about I get quite vociferous about this. I get pretty punchy. I want to see a world where drills don't exist. Now, the problem is a lot of people push against that. And the reason they push against that is because I think they probably misunderstand what I mean by drill. What I mean by drill is when you see groups of children either standing in queues waiting for their turn, or standing in some kind of a box maybe, or some sort of shape that's marked out by cones, and an object comes to them or a ball comes to them, and they perform a certain movement, and then they like pass the ball to someone else, and then they wait for the ball to arrive again before they perform a certain movement. Or you see them maybe passing the ball back and forward to each other, working on, for example, moving in a certain direction or moving off into a certain direction. You see all that kind of thing. In my mind, I don't think that gives any value. Or it gives, sorry, that's not quite true. Sorry, it gives little value. And the reason it gives little value is because you're missing the huge important aspect of learning and learning skill, which is based around the idea of the movement being determined by the environment, the movement being determined by the movements of others. So there doesn't seem any point to me to learn how to, say, control an object, control a ball, or move with a ball in a certain situation, unless you have that stimulus in place. So it's that kind of entirely isolated from the context scenario that I'm not keen on seeing. I don't think it's particularly. I don't think it's fun. I don't think it's engaging. I don't think young people find it particularly exciting. I think young people these days have video games that they can play, which are constantly looking to stretch their abilities continuously. They're highly addictive, and then they're put into a context where they have to stand in a queue and wait for their turn. And when that turn comes, it's fleeting. There's not a great deal of challenge, and then the next thing is they're expected to then apply that into a game which is overly challenging, and the two things really cause them a big challenge, a big issue. I can't see that being a great deal of fun. Worse, I can't see that actually helping them develop skill. So it's actually kind of pointless and fruitless and a kind of waste of time. It's a waste of everybody's time. And there's so much more that could be done that would actually make A, the experience better, hence we keep more people playing, and B, it enhances learning to a far greater extent, which means then that the players are actually going to improve in the way that they're going to improve. So for me, that's the perfect model. We're actually getting retaining more players because they're having a greater time and they're learning more, which means that those who want to progress further can and are perhaps encouraged to do so more readily. So that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. It hits that kind of the double ends of the landscape for me, which is around the whole engagement, retention, keeping people playing, keeping people active, and getting involved in sport and enjoying sport for their entire lives. And I'm combining that with the idea that actually that's where the skills emerge as well, and that's where the love of learning takes place. That exploratory opportunity where you're actually exploring how you might move away from an opponent or something along those lines. So that's my little sort of diatribe about the whole idea of a drill. I'm against that isolated, cone driven, moving, pre-ordered, structured practices that you see a lot of. What I am interested in, but equally what I'm also not happy with, is the idea that people are going to just be playing games. And it goes back to that point I made earlier about having the required number of repetitions. I think it was Rod Thorpe, who was one of the sort of originators of the teaching games for understanding concept. He said at a meeting I was once at that he said kids playing games is better than them doing drills, but it's not a whole lot better. Now, for me, that was a really important point because he's recognizing that actually playing games has some inherent values to it, and of course be much more enjoyable. But from a learning standpoint, it probably isn't necessarily going to tick all the boxes in the way that we're talking about. So, in my mind, as I go back, come back again. It's that space in the middle that we're talking about, and this is where something like the constraints-led approach brings us to. Because what you can do is, if you take the full game, if you take on this side here, if you take an isolated movement, and you say, right, I'm going to put an isolated movement, and I'm going to contextualize it in some way that's just right for that participant, or maybe just beyond that participant's capabilities. Then what you're going to do then is you're going to not only are you going to give them a challenge that they're going to be absorbed by and absolutely love, but you're also going to give them a challenge that's really going to give them an opportunity to explore and learn without necessarily having to give them that kind of having to give them the solution. They may arrive at the solution that you're looking for. They may arrive at a novel solution you haven't thought of that's actually as equally as effective, if not better. And if they don't arrive at either, then you can help and support and guide them towards a solution that may give them, that may help them to be effective in that given scenario. But for me, it's this marriage of context, or the something like the experience they're going to have in a game context, with whatever that movement is that you're trying to get them to do, whether it be catching or it be kicking or receiving or evading or tackling or whatever it might be in whatever game context. Doing that gives the players that opportunity to explore solutions in some kind of realistic scenario. And then by layering up from there, so bringing more context in, then you get to where you want to get to. So by the end of it, you come to a full game. So for me, the reason I'm sort of saying that I'm so against drills is because I just don't think they're necessary. I don't think they're particularly effective, but I also don't think they're really necessary, because there's always ways, if you think about it and you're creative as a coach, and you're actually passionate about engagement and learning, there's always ways in which that you can bring some element of context to the game, and what I call gamify the movement pattern, whatever it is, so that it's a much more enriched experience. And then your skill as a coach is to sort of dial down the contextual interference. Which is a sciencey term for gaminess, if you like, and all the other things that are going to go on and challenge the players. You can dial that down in order to enable them to do the kind of repetitive movements, or you can dial it back up again if you feel that they're stretching, and then that enables you to individualize a little bit. You might take 2 or 3 players who see this, and it's relatively straightforward for them, and you can give them additional contextual challenges versus some other players maybe who are still working through this issue, and then you can keep them with that challenge. So you can kind of layer it up or down according to the abilities of the group, or the speed at which you want them to move forward. And then the skill there is then dialing up or down. So long-winded way of basically putting forward my views on the drills versus games thing. It's probably not as simple as drills versus games. What I'm trying to say is it's not necessary to do this. You don't need to be doing the game side all the time either. That's not as effective. That definitely won't work. Coming in the middle, contextualizing the movement patterns is where the real skill of coaching is, and it'll really help young people develop, and it will also help them be engaged in what we're doing. And then the measure, of course, for coaches, particularly working with young people, I mean, if you're in a talent landscape, you might be comfortable with the idea that if they don't turn up, or they leave the sport, well, maybe it wasn't for them. My view is every single individual counts, and every single individual we should be looking to try and engage and develop. If they don't come back next week, then that's a major failing, and you need to be really thinking about that. So there's this week's rant. Some more coming in the near future. In the meantime, hopefully that's a little bit of a thought stimulus, and look forward to seeing you again.